All right, and we are live. Thank you everyone for being patient with us through some technical difficulties, but the show must go on. I'm really excited to be here. My name is Sarah. If you haven't seen me in the kind of Prefect community before, I'm the growth lead here at Prefect. All right, and we are live. Thank you everyone for being patient with us through some technical difficulties. We are going to walk you through the show must go on. A new guided I'm really excited to be here. Now, my name is Sarah. If you haven't seen Prefect, flows are the most basic concept. They're your workflows. You can turn any Python function into a flow by adding a flow decorator. And this is me kind of playing catch up in case we have some people listening who haven't used Prefect before. The show must go on. A new guide to get the most out of workflows to be here. You want to schedule those workflows, right? You want to trigger them either based on time, event-based workflows, which is something new we're working on. But really, what that comes down to is deployments. In Prefect, we have newly released a guided deployments experience, which will help you tell Prefect where, when, and how to run those to run those workflows. So that has to do with triggers, schedules, infrastructure, workers, and we have George here who's going to walk us through all of that. So George, I'm going to turn it over to you.
What's up, everybody? I just inhaled some water. Yeah, I'm George Cohen. I'm the director of sales engineering here at Prefect. I'm getting some feedback about echoes. Are there echoes happening, Reuter? You let me know. All right, we're gonna dive right into it though. So, like what Sarah was saying, deployment is a pretty crucial concept in the Prefect world. It is essentially the server side, like information, metadata about what you want us to do with your flow code. Flows are super simple. They're built as, hold on, I'm getting some feedback that I need to change my audio. 1 second, gang, hang with me. Looks good. Video source, audio source, normal. I have headphones around. How's it sound, gang? My bad? Thumbs.
I think you're doing well.
Okay, cool. Again, apologies for the technical stuff. We had to switch some things around right before we hopped on. So deployments are basically the server-side metadata about what you want us to do with your flow code. Prefect, because everything is like runtime discovered, we don't need any kind of, and it's all Python. There's no like artifacts in the sense of like jar files or things like that. We just need to know where you're keeping your code and what you want us to do with it. So right here, I have whipped up a little flow for our example today. Barely relevant because we're not going to be focusing on the flow code itself, but a little run through of, I don't know if you've seen the news, but there's some little kerfuffle in Canada that's causing some air quality issues here in the United States. And here in Chicago, it is a little bit overcast, a little smoky. So, I wanted to schedule a flow every hour just to check how the air quality is in Chicago using the OpenMedio API. And I'll evaluate in this task right here if the air quality is good or if it is bad. It'll let me know. So we have a couple tasks. We got a flow to call those tasks in. All super straightforward, normal, classic Prefect stuff. And as always with Prefect, we see this is just Python. The developer experience here is exactly in line with what we expected to have as Python developers. And you'll see also, I didn't put tasks around every single one of my functions. I personally believe that I want to put tasks where it's going to be useful, where it's going to enhance the functionality of our code without increasing complexity, adding unnecessary steps in between. But generally, where there's network calls, I usually put a task on it. So anytime we're pulling an API or doing any kind of serious processing, I throw a task around it. So hopping out of here, we have, I'm just gonna, like a magician, show you my sleeves. ls-la. There is nothing besides a PyCache directory in my current working directory. So we're going to start from scratch today. So getting to it, we have this lovely new function called Prefect init. And Prefect init provides me with a bunch of recipes to start from. And this is really you'll see oh, where's ECS? Where's Kubernetes? Where's Azure container instances? This is about how you want your flow code to be stored. That's what the question is here with these recipes. Now, you'll see there's some options around object storage, around containers, Git, From my end, I'm a old school ops guy. I like using containers for most things, so I'm going to use Docker. I'm going to image name. I have a Docker registry, public and Docker hub, so I'm going to use that, and I'm going to call this Prefect live. Yeah, that's what I'm going to call it. Tag. I'm going to do. I'll do latest. I'm being lazy with creativity. So a few things get created on my behalf when we do this. We got a .prefect ignore file. We got a prefect.yaml file. We have a .prefect directory. So looking at my prefect ignore, if we want to take a little gander around that, we've seen it before on live streams, but let's take a look anyway. It's essentially in the event that we're doing any kind of packaging on, Prefect is doing any kind of packaging on my behalf. It's a way to ensure that certain files or directories are not included in this. This can be super useful when, let's say, I'm doing a bunch of Parquet file processing, and I want to make sure that I don't add those into my Docker images and all of a sudden have a 20 gig Docker image. But by default, it's just a lot of the basic Python stuff. .prefect, the directory is going to be empty for now, and then we have, this is where the magic happens, the prefect.yaml. So here we have a couple things. You'll see, oopsies, hey now. We have this build section right here, which is where my recipe gets dropped in. And so we're seeing we have this prefect _ docker .deployments .steps.docker that build Docker image. This is imported from Prefect and is going to be on my behalf building an image for me. You've seen this before. We've had this for a little bit, but there's some extra functionality that we're adding today. And that functionality is really just ease of use, quality of life stuff, and it's super slick. So then down here we see my deployments being defined. I currently have no deployments that have been created. So this is all going to be nulled out, but let's take a look at how I can get these out the door. So I have my flow, I have my prefect.yaml file, and I want to put that flow in the world. So I'm going to do prefect deploy. That's it, just to deploy. And somewhere in here, some magic happens in which Prefect is going to look in my current working directory for any flows. And it says, hey, I think is this the one you're talking about? This one in flow.py? It just happens to be. Deployment name, I'm going to go with default. I usually just have, that's what I go with. I do want to schedule this, yes. I'm going to do an interval, and I'm going to do it every hour to see if I can go outside. I actually created a work pool for this called live-prefect. We're going to use that. And then for me, Prefect is going to generate a Docker file on the fly and build my image. We're going to use 2.10.17, which is the version of Prefect that I've currently installed. It's going to build it, it's going to push it, and now we have created a deployment. Now, there's one other thing we're going to have to do here. If I look at my prefect.yaml file, I want to just double check that we have, yep, this is the one thing that's going to be necessary. So right here we have these job variables. So job variables is a way for us to pass templated information or even non-templated information into our deployments, because there's like two levels that we configure where how our infrastructure is going to be defined on a per workflow level. I was going to stop for questions, and I remember that there's no one asking me questions. It's just me talking. So I'm going to keep going. So the job variable is really important here, because this is where I'm going to specify things like, I don't know, what image I want to use. And you can see this sweet syntax, this build image.image on line 41. This is where I can actually access the results of my other steps. So this build image is going to be actually output from right here. With this pull step 2, which is really just looking at the directory that my flow is going to be mounted into inside my image. But I'm going to add this down here as well. Oop. I'm going to go do. And then I'm going to go image build image.image. I'm going to get rid of this also because it's going to bother me if I don't. There we go. Thank you. And that's really all I need. You can see here all the rest of the stuff that we went through in that prompt is defined as well. The schedule, interval schedule, anchor date, which happens to be right here and right now. Time zone is UTC in this situation. There's no parameters being passed in. We have the entry point function defined. We can add in things like tags or descriptions or what have you. Flow for determining air quality in Chicago, Illinois.
George, so I want to go into this entry point just for a second. So in the file that you shared in the flow.py file, there were several different flow and task decorators. Can you talk about the relationship between the entry point and kind of how many flows and tasks you'll be creating?
Yeah, so entry point is just like, it's where we just determine where it all begins. When this deployment gets kicked off, it's going to run the function that is defined by the entry point. And that happens to live in flow.py, and it is the function called main. And that function is our flow. Flows are the only thing in Prefect that can be run by themselves. We cannot kick off tasks outside of flows. Tasks must be within flows. If you have multiple flows in a single file, you still need to specify a given entry point. So one has kicked this deployment off. That answers your question there. And then, there's one other thing. I don't have a worker yet. I don't know if y'all have done much with workers, but we rolled these out a couple months ago. Workers are strongly typed, like kind of they're an inheritor for agents. And they're super strongly typed, and there's server-side configuration supported, which I think is incredibly nice. I'm a Prefect 1 user from way back in the day. And in the event that I wanted to apply any kind of sane defaults to a group of flows, I had to do some kind of like ops work. I had to like add YAML to my Prefect agent deployment in Kubernetes, or I had to do other things that were a little more involved. Now I can change that stuff server side, and I'm a big fan of that. But let me install that real quick first. So I actually have a Kubernetes. Okay, good. Cluster up right here. Okay.
So George, as you do that, I think it's actually important to take a step back and maybe just talk about like the changes in workers and work pools compared to kind of the previous configuration and agents, and like what they are even more broadly for those that maybe haven't used them yet or even haven't used agents in Prefect 2 at all.
Definitely. So we're going to kick off a worker first. We're just going to spin one up, which is just Kubernetes stuff. But then we'll look through some of the workers and work pool in practice. One thing I want to call out is we do have a Helm chart these days. If you haven't seen our Helm repo, it's actually better documented than most Helm charts, which I'm pretty proud of us on. But I have a secret.yaml, which you guys aren't going to see. I've already created the secrets. I have this Prefect API key secret, and then I have this values.yaml, which is going to be pointing to just my account ID, my workspace ID, which I don't believe are secret, my work pool, which in this situation is going to be called live-prefect, and I'm turning off HTTP2 because it's been problematic in the past. And I'm just going to install this. Helm install prefect worker, use the chart prefect/prefect worker, and the namespace prefect. I'm going to use this values.yaml file. That's what this kind of breaks down to. And that's it. We got a worker. Container creating for prefect worker -stuff. And now it's running. Cool. So now let's pop over and look at those work pools. How's that sound, Sarah?
Yeah, that sounds great. And also, I just want to add, like, for those listening, so right now, George is doing a really awesome job with Kubernetes. And if you want to scale things in production, Kubernetes is super versatile and super scalable. But if you're just getting started with Prefect, you can just start a worker, just literally Prefect worker start, select a work pool, which George is about to talk about, and you can do that from your local machine. So there's a lot of versatility here that we've introduced, and a lot of guidance into kind of, again, where you want your flows to run, which is exactly what workers are for.
That's a great call out, Sarah. I kind of jumped right into that part. I am using Kubernetes for this because I like it. But if you follow our tutorial here, we cover just using like Docker images and GitHub. And this is all pretty well articulated right here. So if you want to get started with Prefect, if you haven't done this before, I highly recommend popping over to our docs and to our tutorial, which outlines these steps really cleanly in a way that works in your local. Well, this works on your local too. You just have to have a Kubernetes cluster for it. All right. So I have a work pool. I said it was called Live Prefect. This is it. Bunch of stuff to get scheduled on it. And more importantly, let me edit it. So this is what a work pool like behind the scenes looks like. And this is where I can set any kind of sane defaults. Looking at this, I'm happy. I already set this ahead of time. My namespace is Prefect, meaning that all my Kubernetes jobs will run in this namespace. There's a default image if things don't have images already assigned to them. And this is actually all customizable. Let's say I want to add some extra like stuff here. I can hop into this advanced tab and do like all kinds of magic. This is a bit more advanced topic than what we're covering today. But if I want to add like customized fields that I want to pass through, like resource requests, limits, additional tags and labels that go somewhere else, all that's configurable through the advanced tab. So this is where you're going to go to set sane defaults, overrides, widely applicable configuration patterns. All that comes through work pools. And again, it's all server side. There's no need to do any kind of infrastructure mucking around. As soon as we have our worker out the door and hooked into a work pool, we don't have to mess with it too much. If you want to upgrade it, which you should, you can do that. It's probably the most you're going to have to do with it. I like this. This makes me happy. All right, so let me pop over that deployment again. So I don't have to edit this too much right now. Let's look over at my air quality evaluator, and I'll run one of these deployments. I'm going to do a quick run. Rich aardvark. I thought it was aardvark. Is it pronounced aardvark?
I think you got that. Yeah. I mean, we like creativity here at Prefect. We got different flow run names, you know? It's a good one.
I thought it was a V though. Oh man, what happened? Oh geez, that's my bad. Did I forget to pass one thing in? I know what it is. So I go to my deployment. The important thing is infra overrides. And it looks like I changed mine and then forgot to deploy it. So I'm actually just going to change it right here because I can do this in different places. Image, gab coin, prefect live, latest. There we go. I knew that because it said that the file wasn't present, but I know the file was present on that image. It was just using the wrong image. This is the stuff that you pick up if you've done this a couple times. Let's give this another rip on my humongous platypus. I like that one. There we go. That's what I'm talking about. All right, can I go outside yet? That's what this is all about. Air quality is bad. We're staying in. So that's like a really quick blast through of like kind of deployment experience. But again, I'll do it one more time just so y'all at home can follow along. So look at those events. It's like almost so easy that I feel silly demoing it.
George, we actually have now that you're in your terminal, we actually have a few questions from listeners. So I'm going to just ask you some of those. So we got from in the prefect.yaml file under deployments, there was a section that was empty, the section above where the jobs entry point was defined. Is that by design?
Which one?
Let's see. Section above where jobs entry point was designed. Oh, is this the they might be talking about the pull push steps? Oh no, under deployments.
So this right here is all like placeholder stuff. This was generated by Prefect init, and I could have filled this out on my own. Then this right here from 42 down was generated from the deploy walkthrough. So really a more accurate depiction of this file is kind of like this.
Got it. Yep. So it sounds like Nate on our team has also answered some of these questions, which is great. But basically, there are a lot of placeholders is the kind of TLDR. And George, would love to kind of, since you love Kubernetes and you might be kind of the person that I know personally that probably loves Kubernetes the most. So who better to ask? Do you recommend using workers? And if so, Kubernetes or another worker type? Like what are kind of your recommendations? And does Prefect have guides on kind of which worker types to use in using KAIDs?
Yeah, we don't have like a whole lot of direction on like which worker you should use. I think that really depends on more than anything else, like well, use case than comfort. Like I'm a strong believer in using elastic infrastructure, elastic compute resources for our execution environment. Like they're Kubernetes, things like ECS, ACI, Google Cloud Run, GCP Vertex, like they're incredibly flexible. There's a lot of tooling out there that like is silver bullety in the sense of like flexibility of like, oh, we have like infinite scale. You can run whatever you want on our platform, provided you adhere to some very stringent guidelines. And like that's kind of antithetical to how Prefect envisions like this kind of work being done. You can use Prefect for whatever you want. Like it's incredibly flexible, and Kubernetes fits in really nicely with Prefect. We have guides for how to deploy, how to run on most of these ECS, Kubernetes. Kubernetes are most popular, I believe, statistically of runtime environments. And like the reason for that is twofold. One, the elasticity. I can configure scaling so that things scale in and out on Kubernetes and run n number of jobs. And I'm a big fan of infrastructure level scaling, so that like mid flow, I horizontally scale out my infrastructure instead of having to figure out like how to be really clever on memory and CPU and like be predictive. Like with data, like things change. Like sometimes what I need to keep in memory is just bigger, and over time it generally gets bigger as well. Like one of the harder things about data engineering is that our data sets grow over time. So all of a sudden, what we scoped out, what worked for us initially, is no longer really feasible or even tenable. Right? It's like becomes like unbearable or really just breaks. So using like biting things or breaking things up into smaller bites and scaling things out in the infrastructure and having infrastructure that supports that is, I think, a very powerful pattern. Secondarily, I think that the ability to specify very specifically how our Kubernetes jobs are configured is well in line with Prefect usage patterns. So that like if I want to say like this part of the flow is going to be, or this flow is going to have 2 vCPUs and 4 gigs of RAM. And then the next part is going to have 8 gigs of RAM and 8 vCPUs and a GPU. Like totally feasible in Prefect. We can do all that, and that means that we can have control over more than anything else, like how our work gets done. But on top of that is we have the cost lever and the performance lever. A lot of other platforms out there are like, hey, you just give it to us, then we just tell you how many credits you used. And like there's usually a markup on all that, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. These platforms give us a lot of functionality, a lot of usability, but like with Prefect, like you get the keys. Like do whatever you want, like, but you get to determine how you want this work to get done. And those are the reasons that I like Kubernetes more than like anything else. Also, it's cloud agnostic. I can pick the same like knowledge up and drop it wherever I go, which I think is really beneficial. And I also have opinions about other things.
So one piece of infrastructure, right? So we talked about like Kubernetes, and that's kind of how your worker is configured. But another piece of that is with work pools, and that's really you tell like, okay, which flows go to which workers, and you kind of really bridge the gap between all of these different concepts. We have a question actually, which is work pool defaults. Can they be specified in the prefect.yaml file if they should be versioned?
Work pool defaults, can they be specified in the prefect.yaml if they can be versioned? So work pool configuration is all like server side. On this side, we get to specify like overrides and configuration that's going to push down to the variables defined in our work pool. So those job variables, for instance, or even the work pool, like right here on 35, this specifies what work pool this goes to, and then what work queue it goes to within that, and then what job variables are going to be created to override the variables or populate the variables that are defined in our work pool. And so if you want to define in code in a versioned way work pool configuration, there are other options available. The two most popular, and I am a firm believer in like IAC or infrastructure as code or generally declarative code for configuration of like server-side resources whenever possible. We have a Terraform provider that provides this functionality. We have our like client, which also provides this functionality, and both those are I think very valid. It's all like it's incredibly configurable. And if you play around with it a touch, I think that it'll be pretty intuitive. There is content coming out on like workpool configuration, so keep an eye out for that. I think that you'll be seeing that pretty soon of like some more advanced use cases for exactly that kind of pattern, that like version workpool configuration.
Awesome. I too am a huge believer in kind of versioning infrastructure. So yeah, definitely would recommend anyone listening to check out the Terraform provider. And I think at Prefect as a team, we got definitely thinking a lot about that as well. George, I actually wanted to ask if you don't mind looking at the UI. So something that the way that you told us that the air quality was bad in Chicago, which for the record, I'm in Burlington, Vermont. It's pretty bad up here too. We didn't get hit with the bad air quality a few weeks ago, but I guess you and I, George, are getting it now. But in the UI, you showed the logs, right? And I'm kind of curious what the decisioning was for that. So why did you put it in the logs? Is there a different way that you can display that information within Prefect Cloud or use it? And kind of how did you really think about like that piece of information?
I mean, I think about the stretch. But there are a lot of other ways to display information in Prefect Cloud than just printing out logs. This is probably the most primitive possible way. The reason I picked this way is because I was demoing the workpool part of it. However, if I wanted to take advantage of some of our other features, I'd probably put in artifacts for a human readable and digestible artifact, information that persists post flow run. And I'd probably also add some automation so that I can surface this information in a way that's going to be actionable, right? I'll text myself, I'll Slack myself, I'll raise a notification, let myself know that, hey, you can go outside and touch some grass. And artifacts are a handy one. Checking out docs on this, you have a couple different options on these things, but it's really easy. Like I can create a link artifact with like a couple lines, and what all this does is it creates me that persists. So I'd probably go with a markdown artifact right here. We can do it real quick. This is my all the markdown. It's kind of a pain. I mean, it's not an actual. I have to write markdown is the pain. The painful part is I have to decide how I want to format this, which is slightly inconvenient for me to do live. But essentially, this right here, this method is where we can surface the information we want to. Let's do it real quick. This is what you want in Krasnik? Can we do this live?
I mean, we're all learning here, so whatever you can do for us in the next few minutes. I mean, let's see how far we can go.
I'll vim up some markdown. I'm game. All right, let's see. So we got this evaluate air quality, and I want to create. Okay, this is good. This is my evaluation. So then I guess instead of these prints, I'm going to do it like this. I'm going to do let's fight with Vim all day today. All right. Equals. I'm going to tab this over just so that it looks as nice as I want it to. And we'll do quality in Chicago, PM. So these, I don't know what PM actually means. It's like some kind of like part per million thing. Oh, I need to put a little F in here, don't I? Ooh. What's going on? Ooh. We got AQ small, PM 10, AQ med, the time 2. Okay, that's so my little markdown object right there, and I'm gonna do. Let me check my doc real quick. So I think it's just Key markdown description. Cool. Oh man, I thought from prefect.artif is it mark? Yeah, okay. All right, there's that. I'll add return, it's not a monster. And then let's get down to business. Create markdown artifact. Key equals markdown equals markdown result. I think that's all I need. Let's double check it. I have a typo. That's fair. Sorry, I'm in the zone. I'm not talking anymore. You fill the void.
So as George, as you create these and maybe as it runs, we just have another question. Maybe we can multitask here. And the question is again around work pools, which I'm glad that everyone's kind of getting excited about and starting to think about. But what is a suggested level of granularity that work pools are aimed at? So for example, orchestrating prefect, current jobs, how many jobs per work pool, and are they meant to reduce resource contention between job clusters, and how do you really think about that?
Yeah, so work pools are one to many, I suppose, one to many with workers, and so they're really used to, more than anything else, define how our flows should be run, saying that like all flows at this work pool are going to have at least some same defaults applied. I think this is tremendously useful, especially for like, let's say we have like a governance story where we have several teams using Prefect. We want to ensure that labels and tags are applied to cloud resources as they're spun up to ensure like cost attribution, or that we have workers in different Kubernetes clusters or namespaces that have service accounts attached to them that allow for the creation of resources in specified permissioned areas, other namespaces, other AWS accounts, etc. We can apply those configuration settings on our work pools to ensure that they are all in line. One work pool is not an abnormal place for a lot of organizations to start. We're saying that we want the majority of our flows, if not all of our flows, to be running in a similar way on a similar worker. We can have work queues as a child of work pools, which apply some of that resource limiting. We can add concurrency limiting as well as priority, priority is very useful when we have compute limited environments that are not elastic, let's say just virtual machines in which we were not able to auto scale. And we want to ensure that our more high priority workloads get scheduled as desired. So that's I think high level guidance on work pools. As far as like where to draw lines and where to create new work pools, I would say when we would have a new place, the workers that are going to be subscribing to them should be submitting work in a very different way than is currently supported. So like if we need to be running workers in a different Kubernetes cluster with different permissions, it's probably a different worker. So we can apply the various things to that. Let's say different tags, labels, different service account names, what have you, so that things are automatically picked up or the worker automatically submits that work. And also it helps us to understand what work is going where. Folks can go to a single pane of glass to understand what work is being submitted or has been submitted on their infrastructure. And I'll show you that in just one second. So this is an example of the markdown objects that can be created here. And I thought this would render out differently, but whatever. This is a nice place for me to see what happened as a result of this flow run. I like this. I think this is sharp. Did I forget to render this? Yeah, I didn't render this. This is my bad. Going to our work pool. My deployment. Oop. Go to the work pool, live prefect. And in here we can see that single pane of glass of what work is going to be running on the agents or the workers subscribed to this. We can look at the workers that are subscribing, the last time they polled, how they're doing. And the health truly is coming from here though. So I have a default work queue, which is generally sufficient. But this is also where I get to add things like concurrency limits or priority as previously kind of outlined. Very easy to create, CLI, API, or UI. And these are the workers that have been connected to it previously. If it answers the question on work pools, where it finds.
Yeah, I think it totally does. And one other thing I just wanted to point out is when George showed kind of when you showed artifacts, like one thing that's really useful for is, I mean, right now you're just creating Markdown, but you can create any type of artifact, and that's really useful for passing between different objects like tasks in Prefect, and really making the workflows kind of very dynamic and dependent on whatever output is important. So here we're gonna wrap up actually in the next minute or so. But George, I have kind of a fun last question for you, and these are like fun facts about George Coyne. And I'm going to really throw this one at you, which is I'm wondering what you think the most common CLI command is that you run on a daily basis.
Me?
Yes, you.
Like, did somebody ask? Wait, who came up with that question?
No, this isn't me. I came up with the question. This is just me coming up with the question.
Oh man, Nate knows the answer to this question. So there's a tool called the Silver Searcher. Also, rip grep is a good one, but basically like multi-threaded grep. I CLI most things. I'm just more comfortable there. And so I use these tools to like search large amounts of code. I can show an example of this. I'll just like, the most useful command is probably a pipe. I redirect everything, but I'm a big fan of these two tools. I actually considered getting, probably still will, one tattooed on me, but whatever. So AG is this one. This guy Jeff Greer made it. But if I want to like look at, let's see, I was working on docs a lot lately. So I'm gonna go to Prefect. Like I'd be working on docs, I'd be wanting to know where in the docs a certain like projects was mentioned. This will look for only files that end in .md that have the word project in them. It'll show me the line number and where anything with the word project appears. And it's really, really fast. I also use this for things like, let's say I want to do that, and then I want to find out in those files every time like flows gets mentioned. I'll just redirect. So I do that all the time. The other one I use all the time is PB copy. Oh my God, I use PB copy so much. If you guys don't know PB copy is how you take stuff and put it on your clipboard. So I look at my, let's go to Prefect tutorial, my little directory for today. So I have this prefect.yaml and I want to like send it to somebody else. I'll just cat prefect.yaml out. I'll PB copy it. It's on my clipboard. I can paste it. And it makes me very happy. Because if you ever had to, I remember when I first found this command after I'd been copy pasting SSH keys with a mouse for far too long. I was like, I'm never ever using a mouse again.
That is amazing. And George, always love doing live streams with you because I always learn something about Prefect and not about Prefect. So this was awesome. I hope everyone also learned something about Prefect and also got more efficient in the terminal, which I think everyone can only aspire to be George Coyne. And that is the TLDR. So everyone, thank you so much for joining the live stream. Again, apologies for the technical difficulties in the beginning, and we'll see you next time.
See you, gang. Pleasure.